Hello people, I am Jaby KOAY, and this is my review for TAISH, or TAISH, or TAISH. I'm not actually sure how you pronounce the title of this film, nor am I sure how to say the names of a number of people involved in making this film, so I apologize in advance to the filmmakers and to all of you guys, the audience, for anything I say incorrectly. This is written and directed by Bejoy Nambiar. It's also written by Gunjit Chopra, Kartik R. Iyer, Priyesh Kaushik, Anjali Nair, and those are all the people who helped write this movie. And so it's starring Jim Sarbh, Harshvardhan Rane, Pulkit Samrat, Kriti Karbanda, Sanjita Sheikh, and Melissa Raju Thomas. So there's an IMDb summary here of the film, but I thought I'd give you my little summary just to give you more ideas to play with to help you decide if you want to watch this movie. So this is a film about two families on opposite sides of the law that have a link in their history and forces them to cross paths again. And then craziness ensues. So the IMDb summary is a story of friendship and loss of innocence when two worlds clash amid a wedding when a secret exposes a betrayal and innocent friends converge with dangerous criminals and intense violence. That's also a pretty good summary. Can't say which one's better. Right off the bat, I want to say that this is a very interesting film, and I do recommend it. There are issues I have with the movie, but I still recommend it nonetheless because it's something different. And I see in the comments, audiences, this is for both India and the States. People are always asking for something different, something new, something original. And for all its shortcomings, TAISH, you forgive me for saying it wrong. It is definitely original. It's definitely different. I can't quite pinpoint all the inspirations of it. One film that comes to mind is Drive. I did get this sense that there was a lot of inspiration drawn from Drive. Maybe I'm wrong about that. In terms of the style of the way it's shot, I very, very much liked it. The music, I have mixed feelings about. Half the time I was into it. The other half of the time I wasn't into it, and I wish that there was just silence instead or just different music. In terms of the acting, again, like the music, I think most of the time I was into the acting, but there were moments where I just felt like it was very yelly. It was just like way bigger than it really needed to be, or I felt like it sort of took it out of the realm of realism. It got a little bit loud sometimes, and it felt a little bit melodramatic sometimes in terms of the performances. But overall, for the most part, I think the performances were dialed in pretty well. Jim Sarbh is an actor I've been following since pretty much the beginning of me watching Bollywood, because he was in one of the first Bollywood films I ever saw, which is Nirja. And I think that he's a fantastic actor. He's very, very good. Every time I watch him, I'm generally impressed. This was the first time I've watched him, and I had issues with his acting. Now, I am not a professional actor out there making movies like he is. I'm not a professional filmmaker making movies like Bejoy Nambiar. So please take my feelings with a grain of salt. But there were instances in here in which I felt Jim Sarbh's acting was pushing it a little too hard, and I wish it was dialed back. And because I've watched him so many times, I have to imagine that Bejoy Nambiar wanted that, and it was a stylistic choice on his part. So there were some artistic choices made here that I felt like, okay, that was really cool. In certain instances, and other times I just strongly disagreed with it. And I think the acting was one of those parts where Bejoy Nambiar wanted bigger. That doesn't necessarily make him a bad director. What's his name who directed The Shining? Stanley Kubrick. He told Jack Nicholson to go bigger and bigger and bigger with the acting. Jack Nicholson fought back. He's like, I feel like I'm overdoing it. And Kubrick was like, that's the interesting part though. And he wanted him to go bigger. So there are instances where a director, that's just his vision. And so I just happen to disagree with that in terms of a choice. But I think that's something that most people wouldn't necessarily notice. And it's more of me being, a nitpicky kind of guy that I would notice something like that. The thing that was most glaring to me in terms of style was the editing, because for the most part, it was fine, but then there were instances where the film was trying really hard to be stylistic, fading in and out, and just doing like weird stuff where it's not what you usually find in a movie, which, points to that. But it was trying so hard that it was drawing attention to itself and taking me out of the story. For instance, there's this moment of a whole bunch of people crowded in a particular area and the camera's backing up. And I don't know if this was like done deliberately or to just cut time down in terms of the length of this shot, but the camera's moving away from this group of people to get to this character who's standing by himself. It's fading in and out, and it almost feels like a movie trailer. I just disagree with that choice in terms of like implementation into this film. I don't like when it feels like a movie trailer within the movie. I want to see what's going on. There's a really, really important fight scene that happens in the film, and there's this stylized look to it where it feels kind of like some sort of filter was put onto the shots in post of like a kind of a zoomed in, like hazy look. And it really frustrated me because it was a fight scene I was looking forward to. And it's just like, it's obscured in this weird stuff. And the only thing I could think of to justify it, if it wasn't a deliberate stylistic choice, was it was a budgetary choice in order to hide and conceal budgetary limitations. In terms of like building up the tension in the film, I think that Bejoy Nambiar did a good job of that. Once I don't know how you'd say, the adventure kicks off. Once the adventure kicks off in the story, the tension builds up really, really well. But there's a lot of time spent in this movie developing these two families separately. And I don't know that I necessarily needed that amount of development in order for me to have empathy for the characters in this story. I think that was the point. Almost like in The Godfather. If you watch The Godfather, the first hour of each of the Godfather films is just you getting to know these people. There's no real action in the first hour. It's just getting to know all the characters that are going to be involved in this story, almost like a play. And so likewise here, you're spending a lot of time with these different characters. And once the adventure finally kicked off, I thought about it while watching the film, and I'm like, I don't know that I necessarily needed all of that in order, because I was wondering during the first hour, like, where is this movie going? I have no idea where this story is headed. And I should know, I should have a sense, because once it got going, like everything it felt like it was building up towards didn't happen. It just went this complete U-turn of a different direction. And that's a bold choice. Hats off for that choice, because it takes balls to make a decision like that, in my opinion, especially when there's the temptation to just follow the structure that you generally see in Bollywood or films in general, even Hollywood. You know, there's this temptation to follow that typical film structure, and this film doesn't do that. It definitely is different in how it's handling its main characters and the story structure. So it's different. I gotta, give it props for that. But I don't know that I enjoyed it being different, if that makes any sort of sense. I don't know how much it resonated with me. I still, applaud that effort, because I like to tell stories that are different, and it doesn't necessarily resonate with people. Some people look at that and are just confused, like, why did you? And so he's still a filmmaker after my own heart, because he is doing something different than what you generally see. That being said, again, I still recommend this. I still think it's a worthwhile film. There's interesting characters, there's interesting plot developments, there's interesting tension that arises in the film, there's interesting scene work that happens. There's just a lot of coating on top of this vehicle that bugged me, if that makes any sense. So I'll try to dive a little bit more into it right now in the spoiler section of this. Again, I recommend it. Please check it out and let me know your feelings, and then come back to this part of the review, which is the spoiler section. So what am I talking about when I say there's this long development? There's this whole thing that's developed with Polly and his brother, and the tension between them. The film kicks off with Polly shooting this random dude at a party, and he's holding a gun to his brother because his brother took his woman. Essentially, I don't understand how exactly that happened. There must be some sort of cultural thing that I just don't understand, or the story just never bothered to explain it, or I just missed it. But I didn't get why this woman that used to be with Polly ended up with his brother. I get the tension from there, but a lot of time is spent building up this tension between these two brothers. But it's like the end result is ultimately he wants to avenge his brother. So why did I have to spend all this time on that? If I was just going to come back to he's going to avenge his brother, it felt like a little bit wasteful, because that's not really the story. The story is his brother ends up getting his ass kicked by this dude at a wedding because he molested the dude's best friend. And that's where it kicks off. So I felt like you could have shaved off a good 30 minutes of movie in that first hour to get to the adventure faster, to get to the point faster. And another thing that was unique in this film that I'm of two minds about is Jim Sarbh's character, because he, for all intents and purposes, is the main character in this movie. Everybody else is supporting, right? It's him and Polly, essentially. So Jim Sarbh is your protagonist in essence, and Polly is the antagonist. Real quick, I want to say the dude who's assisting Polly throughout the film, I don't know his name. The actor who I'm thinking of is Sarbh Sachdeva. I don't know his character's name, but man, did he play a really good villain in this movie. In his IMDb, it says Sarbh Sachdeva is a highly respected acting coach in the Indian film industry. It makes perfect sense why he is so goddamn amazing. Sarbh Sachdeva was the most stellar performance in this movie, because I'm watching this dude, I buy him completely. Like, for him alone, it's worth the price of admission. This dude was so good in his role as this right-hand villain, and he's got this moment where after Polly's younger brother dies, he's on the phone with Polly, and Polly's like, I'm gonna kill you next. I'm gonna kill you first, rather. Sarbh Sachdeva is like, well, what did I do? And like, he was like so hurt like that this guy who he loves and would do anything for is like saying he's gonna kill him. Like, what the hell? And he was just so good. And he was like, you loved to hate him as well. You loved to be afraid of him. And just watching him do his thing, he was so damn good. I want to watch more of Sarbh Sachdeva. He is so damn good. His performance was so strong in this movie. I came away with him being my favorite character in this entire film. He felt the most realized as a person. So Jim Sarbh, he spends a lot of this movie not being an active character. In fact, once we find out, Jim Sarbh's link to the past with Polly's brother, you find out he's basically spent his entire life avoiding this, just like putting it in the back of his mind, and now it's in his face again, and he just wants it to go away. He's not an active character. His response to his best friend Sonny taking action into his own hands and beating up Polly's brother and basically messing him up, crippling him, his response does feel real. But then Jim Sarbh's character just continues to, Rohan Kalra just continues to do that for so much of this movie, not be active. He's just so indignant for so much of this film. And it takes most of the movie before he decides that he's gonna take action as well. That is unique in terms of like what I'm used to for American films. You want your main character to be way more active than that. Whereas he's like constantly just trying to sit back, and he's not interested in getting his hands dirty. He's not interested in taking action. He's not interested in doing much of anything. Just like trying to be a recluse and avoid everything. It's easier to have that when it's not your main character, but when it's your main guy in the movie, you want that person, generally speaking, to be more active because it's his adventure you're essentially following, at least for his half of the movie. It felt like everybody around him was active, just not him. Like I said, that is unique in terms of storytelling. Like, you generally don't want to do that. Again, hats off for making a bold choice like that, because that's a very realistic choice, I feel like. I can see this guy in real life. I can see the real life version of that. But I don't want to watch real life in a movie. I want to see like what someone in a movie would do. And so that's why it was just a little bit funny for me, with Jim Sarbh not being a very active protagonist until like 3/4 of the way into the movie. And even then, it's like the way he was handling things was a little bit, I guess it made sense. I take back whatever I was about to say. It made sense why he handled things the way he did, because, Sonny is a very reckless, character, and he's just trying to wrangle him in. And he handled things, he sort of resolved it, but then Sonny screwed that up. Early on in the film, when Jim Sarbh was meeting up with all his friends at his brother's wedding, there was this like bromance happening, this camaraderie, and for a split second I was like, this is a little bit much, but then they kept pushing it and I was like, oh, you know what, I'm into it. And so I was actually buying into a lot of the camaraderie that the brothers and the friends all had at the wedding. Like, I actually liked all that as character stuff. I thought it was cool, and it made them feel more three-dimensional and lifelike. I felt like I could see these people in real life, and that was cool. There was interesting moments like at a dinner table where Jim Sarbh is basically defending his woman's reputation in his father's eyes. Jim Sarbh's father sort of like interrogating her. I liked all that in terms of character stuff. I thought that was neat. The problem is, for me, it was underscored by this music that was very distracting. It wasn't just like music that was really trying to make me feel something. It was also music that had lyrics in it. And I was like, okay, I'm trying to just hear what they're saying, but I'm also listening to these lyrics that are, it's sort of, my ear is trying to decide what to listen to, and it just felt distracting. I think the action moment in the club when Sonny is going after Polly's little brother, younger brother, I should say. The build-up towards that was kind of cool. I liked the music in that. I liked the way it was shot. After that, there was a car chase sequence that they showed, and I didn't really understand the blocking of the car chase sequence. I didn't really understand the intention, because before that, you saw Polly and Sarbh Sachdeva. You saw them leaving the mansion, and outside the mansion, you saw Sonny and Rohan. Why didn't they kill him at the mansion? Why was there this this 24-hour waiting period to chase them by vehicle? And then, like, what the hell happened there? The vehicle chase was a little bit funny because Roldhan and Sunny are on the motorcycle behind Polly and Sarbh Sachdeva. They're chasing him, right? Polly realizes what's going on. They, like, do some stuff with the car, and they don't shoot at him. Sarbh Sachdeva's pointing at him, and they chase him by car. I'm like, what exactly was the plan there? I don't understand what was the goal. I was not privy to what the objective was there. But then that's the climax of the movie, and then the fight scene ensues because Sarbh Sachdeva dies in the car accident, which was realistic, I guess, because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. It wasn't something I was expecting because the vehicle they were in seemed to go through two vehicles that were trying to cross the street. It just blew through it. I wasn't expecting it to be a car accident that followed. So that was a little bit surprising, and I suppose probably realistic, as opposed to what you generally see in films where these cars are like tanks that just drive through other cars. Sarbh Sachdeva dies. Admittedly, I was a little bit sad that he died because I really liked his character. He had to go, though. He was a dangerous guy. There's a fight between Roldhan, Polly, and Sunny. I just wanted to see this fight unfold. I didn't want it to be obscured in this weird stylistic editing stuff. I just wanted to see that fight. And the music underscoring it was one of the few instances in the film where I'm like, this stylistic choice with the music, I actually dig. I actually enjoy it. I appreciate it. It helped the mood. I don't know why. It did something for me. I can't really articulate why, but it did. And that's not the only moment where I like the music. There were other instances where I like the music, but like I said earlier, that dinner sequence, the moments where Jim Sarbh is, with Afra, and it's like sweet and sentimental, and then that music comes in, it's just like, it's a bit much for me, for my tastes. I really, really liked the work that Bejoy Nambiar and his director of photography did in this film. I thought that it was one of the most fantastic looking movies I've watched in a while. I've been watching some pretty dope-ass films recently, but this has to be one of them. In terms of just being cinematic, like, the look of the movie was fantastic. I just thought it was great. The cinematographer is Harshvardhan. Oberoi? I don't know. Him and Bejoy Nambiar together, they made a really beautiful looking movie. It was beautiful to look at. The pictures were nice, and it's definitely up there as one of my favorite films to look at because it looked really, really pretty. After getting about halfway through the film, I started to realize why there is a series version of the movie where you can watch it episodically instead of the feature film. And I think that it actually might be better viewed as a web series or as an episodic series rather than a feature film because of the issues that I mentioned earlier, like Jim Sarbh not being active until an hour into the movie. I feel like, or even more than that, it felt like 3/4 of the movie. I feel like when it's a show, you can get away with that kind of thing for some reason. But when it's a movie, and this is me saying this without having watched the show, of course. I feel like when it's a movie, it's a little bit harder to sell, at least me. It's harder to sell me on a film where your main character is just not active. If it's a show, I think that you can get away with it a little bit more. You can bend the rules of storytelling a little bit more because you're also following all these other things involved. And I think that the show is longer, like by about 36 minutes or so. And so you get more story. It's a fuller, more realized story in being told as a series. And so I think it allows you to be more forgiving of stuff like that. And I wouldn't perceive it necessarily as a shortcoming in the context of a show or in the confines of a show versus the confines of a film. Those are my feelings, you guys. I did enjoy it. There's a lot that I took away from this, enjoying it. There are things that I didn't like, but overall, I still applaud the movie. I still think there's a lot of wonderful things to take away from this. Like I said, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a well-made movie. There are shortcomings I felt that I didn't appreciate, but I think that I appreciated more things than not. And that's why I'm still recommending it. By this point, you've watched it yourself. And I would be curious to hear from you guys in the comments who watched both the film version and the web series or the show version. Thanks so much for hanging out. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Check out our other reactions, reviews, short films, vlogs, and interviews. And a big shout out to Bejoy Nambiar for supplying me with a screener for this film and being open to me giving my honest opinion about it. I really, really appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing more of Bejoy Nambiar's movies. I think that he's a very, very talented dude. I'm not just saying that because he gave me a screener. I do think he's very, very talented, and I do look forward to watching more of his stuff. That's it for now, you guys. Thanks so much for hanging out. I'm Jaby KOAY. Peace out.